Jessica Hartwell's new home in an upscale Connecticut neighborhood boasted the kind of perfect beauty that seemed straight out of a magazine. Champagne bottles sparkled on the white marble kitchen counters, and logs crackled cheerfully in the living room fireplace. On this chilly November evening, the Hartwells were hosting a housewarming dinner party. "Jessie, this house is absolutely wonderful," Linda Morrison exclaimed, taking her daughter's arm. She was always impeccably groomed with perfect hair and elegant clothing, known throughout the neighborhood as a beautiful mother. "Michael is truly a wonderful husband. A successful lawyer who can buy you such a lovely home." "Thank you, Mom," Jessica smiled with satisfaction. She had inherited her mother's beauty and her father's strong will. It's all thanks to Michael's hard work. The children have adjusted well to their new environment, and were truly happy. At the dining table, Robert was telling his grandchildren stories from his military days. The former Army colonel kept his back ramrod straight and never let his stern expression slip. However, he occasionally showed a gentle smile in front of his grandchildren. "Grandpa, another war story?" 8-year-old Sarah asked innocently. "Not war stories. I'm talking about discipline and responsibility," Robert gently patted his granddaughter's head. "People must take responsibility for their actions. That's what it means to become an adult." Emily was in the kitchen pouring wine while listening to her family's pleasant conversation. She wasn't married and had no children. She worked as a secretary at a pharmaceutical company but had recently been on sick leave due to poor health. She took a deep breath and returned to the living room with her wine glass. "Emily, please sit down," Michael offered her a chair. As a lawyer, he was always kind to his sister-in-law. "How's work going? Are you feeling better?" "Thank you, Michael. I still get tired easily, but I'm much better," Emily answered with a smile. However, there was a hint of anxiety in that smile. Linda looked at her daughter's complexion with concern. "Emily, haven't you lost weight recently? Are you eating properly?" "I'm fine. It was just a cold." Emily was about to take a sip from her wine glass when she suddenly felt nauseous and put her hand to her mouth. "What's wrong?" Jessica stood up with concern. "I feel a little sick." "Excuse me, I need to use the restroom." Emily hurriedly left her seat. A few minutes later, when Emily returned from the bathroom, the entire family was looking at her with worried expressions. "Emily, are you really all right?" Linda placed her hand on her daughter's forehead. "You don't seem to have a fever, but you look pale." Robert looked at his daughter with stern eyes. "I heard you've been taking time off work lately. Isn't there something you're hiding?" Emily felt her father's sharp gaze as she sat back down. Her heart was beating rapidly. Maybe she couldn't hide it any longer. "Actually," Emily began speaking with a trembling voice, "I'm pregnant." The room fell into silence. Only the sound of logs crackling in the fireplace could be heard. Linda's face went pale. "Pregnant? Emily, but you're not married?" Robert stood up and slammed his fist on the table. "What? Who's the father?" Jessica stared at her sister with a shocked expression. "Emily, is this really true?" Emily struggled to hold back the tears that were about to overflow. "Yes, it's true." "Where is the man?" Robert's voice trembled with anger. "Are you going to make him take responsibility?" "That's..." Emily was at a loss for words. "It's complicated." Linda collapsed into her chair. "Don't tell me the father is married? Or did he run away?" "Mom, it's not like that," Emily desperately tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come. She couldn't tell them the truth. Jessica said coldly, "You're not a child anymore, so why did this happen? Didn't you use protection?" Michael restrained his wife. "Jessie, now isn't the time to blame her." However, Robert's anger didn't subside. "I absolutely will not allow my daughter to have an illegitimate child. Don't you realize what the neighbors will say?" Linda said with tears in her eyes. "Emily, look at your sister. She made a proper marriage and built a wonderful family. Why are you always like this?" Emily quietly stood up. Her family's disappointed and angry stares cut deep into her heart. "I'm sorry, I'll go home tonight." "Emily, wait," Michael called out, but she didn't turn around. The sound of the front door closing quietly echoed through the house. Only heavy silence remained in the beautiful living room. Emily wiped away her tears as she returned to her apartment. Now 5 months pregnant, she could no longer hide it. The next morning, she made an appointment with an obstetrician and went to the hospital alone. As she looked at the small life on the ultrasound screen, Emily steeled her resolve. Even without her family's understanding, she would protect this child. However, her family's reaction was harsher than she had expected. The following Sunday, Emily visited her parents' house. Linda greeted her daughter at the door, but her expression was cold. "Emily, come in. Your father wants to talk to you." In the living room, Robert was reading the newspaper. When Emily entered the room, he folded the paper and looked at his daughter with stern eyes. "Sit down," Robert's voice had the tone of a military command. "I've thought about it for a week, but my conclusion hasn't changed. I won't allow you to have that child." "Dad, but I..." "Listen quietly," Robert raised his hand to silence his daughter. "As a soldier and as a father, I have a responsibility to protect the family's honor. Do you understand how much having an unwed mother will damage our family's reputation?" Linda sat on the edge of the sofa and sighed. "Emily, you're still young. You can start over. But if you have this child, what will happen to your future?" "I love this child. I'll raise it on my own," Emily answered with a trembling voice. "Love?" Robert sneered. "Do you think you can raise a child on love alone? How can a woman with no financial means and no husband make a child happy?" "I have a job. On a pharmaceutical company secretary's salary?" Linda interrupted. "Emily, face reality. You can't do it." Just then, they heard the sound of the front door opening. Jessica came in with her 2 children. "Hello, Dad, Mom. Emily's here too." Jessica left the children with their grandparents and sat next to Emily. "Sister, I've been thinking about what happened last week. As a family, we need to support you." A light of hope appeared in Emily's eyes. "Jessie, thank you." However, Jessica's next words froze Emily's heart like ice. "So I'll introduce you to a good hospital. It's still not too late." "What kind of hospital?" Emily was confused. "A hospital that can perform abortion surgery," Jessica answered in a businesslike tone. "Michael has a colleague who's an obstetrician. He'll perform the surgery with complete confidentiality." Emily stood up. "I could never do such a thing." "Why not?" Jessica also stood up and stared at her sister. "Sister, you're not seeing reality. Do you understand what it means to have a child as an unwed mother?" "I would definitely have an abortion," Jessica's voice was cold. "A child conceived in adultery isn't worth having." "It's not adultery," Emily shouted. "Then why isn't the man taking responsibility? Why are you alone?" Jessica pursued relentlessly. Emily couldn't answer. Telling the truth would only cause greater confusion. Linda stood up and took Emily's hand. "Emily, Mom loves you. That's exactly why I don't want you to make a mistake. If you have this child, your life will be over." "My life won't be over," Emily shook off her mother's hand. "This child is the beginning of my new life." Robert clenched his fists in anger. "Stubborn girl. Then let me be clear. If you have that child, you're no longer my daughter." "Dad." Emily was stunned. "Robert, that's going too far," Linda tried to restrain her husband. "It's not going too far," Robert refused to budge. "I've lived my life as a soldier, valuing discipline and responsibility. If my daughter engages in shameless behavior, I have no choice but to cut ties." Jessica said coldly, "Dad's right. Think about protecting our family's honor." Emily looked around at her family. The faces that should have been filled with love now looked like cold judges. "I understand," Emily said quietly. I'll have this child alone and raise it alone. If you want to cut family ties, so be it. Linda's eyes filled with tears. Emily, don't say such things. Mom, you're the ones who said you'd cut ties first. Emily began putting on her coat. I love this child. Even if the whole world opposes me, I'll protect this life. No one stopped Emily as she headed for the door. Over the following weeks, Emily became completely isolated. At work, news of her pregnancy spread, and her colleagues' gazes became cold. Her supervisor recommended she resign, and Emily eventually quit her job. Living off her savings, Emily moved to a small apartment in the city. It was much smaller and in an older building than her previous home. However, she didn't complain. For the sake of the child in her womb, she had to be strong. One day, while Emily was shopping at the supermarket, she accidentally ran into Jessica. What are you doing in a place like this? Jessica seemed surprised. Shopping. I moved to this area. Emily tried to remain calm. Jessica looked at Emily's modest clothing and her belly, now large with pregnancy, and showed a sympathetic expression. Listen, it's still not too late. Come back to the family. Come back? Emily smiled bitterly. Dad said he wouldn't recognize me as his daughter. That was just him being emotional. Dad and Mom are really worried about you. Worried? Emily shook her head. All you're worried about is appearances. Not my happiness. Jessica couldn't hide her irritation. How are you going to raise a baby when you can't even get married? What about money? Emily began pushing her cart and walking. That's my problem. Don't make me laugh, Jessica followed after her. You have nothing. No money, no husband, no stable job. Having a child in such circumstances is selfish. Emily turned around. Selfish? I'm just trying to protect a life. Protect a life? Jessica sneered. Are you thinking about the child? Do you know what a child without a father goes through? Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. However, she answered with dignity. I'll be both father and mother to this child. My love won't lose to anyone's. Jessica shook her head in exasperation. Sister, you're escaping from reality. When you face reality someday, you'll surely regret it. Emily left the supermarket. As she got into her old car in the parking lot, she became confident in her decision. Her family might have abandoned her, but the child in her womb was different. This small life was her real family. Back at her apartment, Emily spread out baby supply catalogs. Within her limited budget, she selected the bare necessities. The baby in her womb gave her a small kick. Emily smiled and placed her hand on her belly. It's okay, we'll work hard together. In the depths of March, Emily woke up in the middle of the night with severe labor pains. Curled up on the small bed in her apartment, she looked at the clock. It was 2 a.m. Noticing that the contractions were getting closer together, she hurriedly called a taxi. St. Mary's General Hospital, please. The taxi driver looked with concern at the pregnant woman heading to the hospital alone. Ma'am, where's your family? I'll be fine alone, Emily answered with a face twisted in pain. Upon arriving at the hospital, nurses hurriedly wheeled Emily to the delivery room. The attending physician, Dr. Wilson, was a kind middle-aged woman. Emily, regulate your breathing. You'll see your baby soon. After 12 hours of long labor, Emily gave birth to a baby boy at 2 p.m. The moment the baby's first cry echoed through the delivery room, tears overflowed from Emily's eyes. Congratulations. It's a healthy baby boy, the nurse placed the cleaned baby on Emily's chest. As Emily held the small life, she felt as if all her previous hardships had been rewarded. Hello, Ethan. I'm Mommy. She whispered the name she had already chosen to her son. The name Ethan meant strong. She had chosen this name with the hope that this child would live a strong life. When Emily was moved to her hospital room, the head nurse Margaret came to see her. Emily, we'd like you to fill in emergency contact information. Emily shook her head. There's no one to contact. Your family? Margaret showed a surprised expression. Don't they need to be notified of the birth? No, I'm really fine alone. Margaret looked at Emily with sympathetic eyes. I understand. But could you at least give us an emergency contact? Emily reluctantly wrote down her parents' phone number. However, she added, contact not necessary. The next day, Emily was preparing to leave the hospital. She had laid Ethan in a small baby carriage and was packing her belongings. The nurses were worried about her taking the baby home alone. Emily, are you really all right on your own? A young nurse named Sarah asked with concern. Yes, thank you. We'll be fine, Emily smiled. However, Margaret had secretly contacted Emily's parents the night before. She couldn't let a young mother who had given birth alone and was trying to leave without anyone's help go unassisted. Just as Emily was about to head for the hospital entrance, familiar figures emerged from the elevator. She could see Linda, Robert, and Jessica walking toward her. Emily. Linda rushed over. Why didn't you contact us? Emily stopped. Mom, how did you get here? A nurse called us, Robert answered in a heavy tone. We heard you gave birth alone. Jessica peered into the baby carriage. This child is Ethan. Emily stood protectively. My son. Tears welled up in Linda's eyes. Emily, why did you do this alone? Because you abandoned me. Emily's voice was quiet but filled with strong will. At that moment, a black luxury car stopped at the hospital entrance. A man in a navy suit got out from the driver's seat. When he spotted Emily, he approached with long strides. Emily, the man's voice was gentle. Emily's face went pale. Alexander, why are you here? I heard you gave birth. Alexander stopped and looked at the baby carriage. Let me meet my son. The three Morrison family members looked at the man with confused expressions. Robert stepped forward. Who are you? Alexander looked at Emily, then turned to Robert after she gave a small nod. I apologize for not introducing myself earlier. I'm Alexander Sterling. Emily's. Sterling? Jessica gasped. At that moment, several black cars arrived in the hospital parking lot. Several men in black suits got out of the cars. And from the last car, a distinguished white-haired gentleman emerged. Alex, the gentleman called to Alexander. Sorry, I'm late. Linda asked in a trembling voice, who is that gentleman? Alexander took a deep breath. My father, Charles Sterling. Chairman of Sterling Enterprises. Jessica's face turned pale. Sterling Enterprises was one of the most influential corporate groups on the East Coast. Charles Sterling approached. His dignified presence drew attention from hospital staff as well. May I meet my grandson? Charles's voice was gentle, but his presence was overwhelming. Emily was confused. Mr. Charles, why? Alex told me everything, Charles smiled kindly. Including how you've been struggling alone. Robert couldn't fully grasp the situation. Emily, what is this about? Alexander took Emily's hand. Let me explain our relationship. But you, Emily started to say and stopped. Emily, there's no need to hide anymore, Alexander looked at her. I know you fought alone to protect me. But that's no longer necessary. Charles approached the baby carriage. He's a fine boy. He's definitely inherited the Sterling bloodline. Linda asked in a trembling voice, Emily, is he really? Yes, Emily answered quietly. Ethan's father. Alexander said while looking at the baby, Emily, I'm truly sorry. For leaving you alone. You had your circumstances, Emily smiled. I understood. Charles said to Robert, your daughter has endured great hardship because of us. We, as a family, will take responsibility. Jessica stared at Alexander with an incredulous expression. But didn't you have a fiancé? That engagement was broken off, Alexander answered quietly. I need Emily and my son. Linda hurried forward. Emily, why didn't you tell us? Something so important? Emily looked at her mother. Mom, you wouldn't listen to me. From the beginning, you just made assumptions and blamed me. Robert was completely confused. The person he had said he would disown turned out to be the lover of the Sterling family heir. Alexander said to Emily, Emily, won't you come with me? I want to prepare a proper home for you and our son. Emily looked around at her family. The people who had abandoned her months ago now wore expressions of confusion and regret. Let me think about it, Emily answered quietly. Charles smiled. Of course. But may I at least see my grandson's face? Emily quietly lifted Ethan from the baby carriage. Tears welled up in Charles's eyes. He's a beautiful child, Charles said with emotion. My first grandson. In the tense atmosphere, Alexander took a deep breath. Looking at Emily, he quietly began to speak. Thank you for letting me meet my son, Emily. Robert stepped forward. Wait. Who exactly are you? Why was Emily hiding about you? Alexander glanced at Emily. After confirming her small nod, he turned back to Robert. I apologize. I'm Alexander Sterling, Vice President of Sterling Enterprises. Jessica's face went pale. Of Sterling Enterprises? But weren't you Jennifer Hamilton's fiancé? Alexander showed a bitter expression. It was an arranged marriage. But when I met Emily, everything changed. Linda asked in a trembling voice, Emily, then why didn't you explain this to us? Emily answered while holding her son, Mom, Alexander had complicated circumstances. His engagement involved a corporate merger between two families. My pregnancy could have ruined everything. Charles Sterling quietly stepped forward. Miss Emily, I heard everything from my son. How you bore this burden alone and tried to protect Alex. But, Robert was confused. Why did Emily end up giving birth alone? Alexander answered with a pained expression, I was a coward. I didn't have the courage to break off my engagement with Jennifer. When Emily told me about her pregnancy, I said I needed time. And I decided to wait for you, Emily continued. But I couldn't explain to you all. In a situation where nothing was decided yet, I couldn't put Alexander's position at risk. Jessica said with an incredulous expression, Sister, were you lying to us? Not lying, Emily's voice was resolute. I just couldn't tell the truth. From the beginning, all you thought about was blaming me. Charles said in a heavy tone, I also bear responsibility. I was obsessed with my son's engagement and refused to see the truth. Alexander took Emily's hand. Emily, I can imagine how much you suffered. I'm truly sorry for leaving you alone. But now you're here, Emily smiled. That's enough. Linda approached with tears streaming down her face. Emily, Mother was wrong. I made assumptions without even trying to listen to you. The mistake we made is irreversible, Robert also said in a heavy voice. I should have trusted my daughter. At that moment, another car arrived in the hospital parking lot. An elegant middle-aged woman got out of the black luxury car. It was Charles's wife, Elizabeth Sterling. Charles, I'm sorry I'm late, Elizabeth approached her husband while noticing Emily and Ethan. Is this lady? This is Miss Emily, Charles introduced. And our grandson, Ethan. Elizabeth's eyes lit up. Oh my, what a beautiful baby. She smiled at Emily. Miss Emily, it's an honor to meet you. I've always heard how much my son loves you. Jessica was confused. But what about Alexander's engagement? It was officially broken off yesterday, Elizabeth answered. Jennifer's family understood as well. A marriage without love makes no one happy. Alexander looked at Emily. Emily, I won't run away anymore. I'm prepared to risk everything for you and our son. Robert stepped forward. Alexander, I understand your sincerity. However, Emily has been fighting alone for these past months. Shouldn't her feelings be the first consideration? Emily looked at her father with a surprised expression. For the first time, her father was thinking from her perspective. Dad, Emily's voice trembled. Emily, I was wrong, Robert turned to his daughter. You carried a great responsibility alone and gave birth to your son admirably. I'm proud of you. Linda also wiped away tears as she spoke. Emily, we abandoned you. But if it's possible, could we be a family again? Jessica looked down shamefully. Sister, I said truly horrible things. Recommending abortion. Emily looked around at her family while holding Ethan. Everyone, I don't resent you. I was just disappointed. Charles said quietly, Miss Emily, the Sterling family welcomes you and your son with all our hearts. But the final decision is yours. Alexander knelt down. Emily, marry me. I'm confident I can make you happy. I want to be the best father to our son. At the hospital entrance, people who happened to witness the sudden proposal began to murmur. Nurses were also watching from the windows. Emily touched Alexander's cheek with a trembling hand. Stand up, Alexander. My answer is. She paused for a moment, then smiled. Yes. Applause erupted. Charles and Elizabeth beamed with joy, and Linda was moved to tears. Robert approached Alexander. Son, please take good care of Emily. Yes, father-in-law, Alexander bowed deeply. Jessica timidly approached. Sister, I'm truly sorry. There's no way to apologize enough. Emily took her sister's hand. Jessie, we're sisters. From now on, will you love Ethan as his aunt? Tears welled up in Jessica's eyes. Of course. I'll be the best aunt in the world. Elizabeth approached Emily. Miss Emily, you can come to our home starting tomorrow if you'd like. We'll prepare the best environment for our son. Emily looked down at Ethan. Her small son was sleeping peacefully. She took a deep breath and answered. Thank you. But we need time. For Ethan and me and Alexander to become a real family. Alexander smiled. Take your time. I'll wait. Charles said gently, that's for the best. Family is something that's built over time. As the sunset illuminated the hospital windows, Emily felt that her life was entering a new chapter. It was a development she couldn't have imagined months ago. The days of fighting alone had finally been rewarded. Ethan made a small sound. Emily looked at her son and vowed in her heart. She would give this child a home filled with love. And she would teach him the true meaning of family. The wonder of a family connected not just by blood, but by hearts. 1 year later in spring, at the Sterling family estate built on the beautiful hills of Connecticut, Ethan's first birthday party was being held. The vast garden was blooming with colorful flowers, and children's laughter echoed throughout. Emily wore a white sundress and watched over Ethan, who had just started walking. Her son was toddling across the lawn toward his grandfather Charles. Ethan, over here, Emily spread her arms, and her son happily changed direction. You're a wonderful mother, Alexander placed his hand on his wife's shoulder from behind. 3 months ago, the two had held a quiet ceremony and officially became husband and wife. We've become a wonderful family, Emily looked up at her husband and smiled. Both families had gathered for the party. Linda and Elizabeth had completely hit it off and were discussing their grandson's development. Robert and Charles were enthusiastically debating Ethan's future. Jessica had come with her husband Michael and their 2 children, but her expression lacked its former brightness. Actually, Michael's infidelity had been discovered 6 months ago, and they were currently separated. Meanwhile, witnessing Emily's happy marriage, Jessica was reconsidering her own choices. Sister, Jessica approached Emily. You look truly happy. Jessie, are you okay? Emily took her sister's hand. If there's anything I can do to help. Thank you. But this is something I have to decide, Jessica smiled bitterly. Do you remember what I said to you back then? That you couldn't even get married? That's in the past now, Emily answered gently. But in the end, you were right. A marriage without love is far worse than being single with love. Emily hugged her sister. Jessie, you're still young and beautiful. You'll surely find true love. Meanwhile, Linda was surrounded by neighborhood friends, proudly talking about her grandson. However, the gazes from people who knew she had abandoned her daughter just months ago weren't all warm. Linda, I heard Emily had her baby all alone, neighbor Martha said with a meaningful smile. It must have been difficult without family support at that time. Linda's face reddened. She knew that her treatment of her daughter had become neighborhood gossip. Emily noticed this and walked over to her mother. Mom, Ethan is looking for Grandma. Emily, Linda looked at her daughter with gratitude. It's okay, Mom. The past is the past. We're family now. Emily took her mother's arm and headed toward her grandson. In a corner of the garden, Robert was drinking beer alone. The former military man deeply regretted his error in judgment. He had been made to realize how foolish his decision to abandon his daughter had been. Alexander approached Robert. Father-in-law, is something wrong? No, just thinking, Robert sighed heavily. As a soldier, I thought I had always made the right decisions. But in the most important moment, I made the worst decision. But Emily has forgiven you now. That makes it even more painful, Robert smiled bitterly. That child is truly strong. Much stronger than I am. At dusk, as guests were leaving, Emily sat on a garden bench nursing Ethan. Alexander sat beside her, gazing at his wife and son. Emily, meeting you changed my life. Mine too. Because of those dark days, today's happiness shines even brighter. You forgave my family. But don't you think your family has changed too? Emily answered while looking down at her son, people can change. If there's love. The first stars were beginning to twinkle in the sky. Emily spoke in her heart to herself from a year ago. The loneliness and despair of that time were never in vain. Because of that, she could understand the value of today's happiness. Ethan fell peacefully asleep in his mother's arms. Emily gently kissed her son's forehead. She was truly grateful for the miracle this small life had brought. Blood ties alone don't make a family, Emily whispered softly. People who love and support each other are the real family. Alexander squeezed his wife's hand. Our family might grow even bigger from now on. Emily smiled and looked at her husband. With eyes full of hope for the future. The sound of family laughter could be heard in the distance, carried by the spring night breeze. It was a peaceful and happy time for the family that had begun a new chapter.